Okay, so today I'm doing a sort of a first patch deep dive on the ARBHAR, which is a granular synthesizer module. Again, a big fan of granular synthesis. It kind of sprung upon me with the GR1. I also have the Nebula, and now with the ARBHAR, heard great things, and so just wanted to kind of do a first test drive and see where it leads me. Another cool thing that happened while I was doing this, instead of just grabbing some random samples, I decided to kind of record a bunch on my own. Made a patch with the DECKARD'S voice, recorded some guitar samples with guitars that I should be playing a lot more often, but I haven't. It was a little dusty. Also got to use a bunch of random plugins that I've not touched in a while, so kind of became a little bit of a rabbit hole, but it was awesomely fun because that little extra step made it a little bit even more interesting. So we'll see where that takes us. Okay, so I've got the samples loaded onto the bitbox 2, which I will get into some other point later. But so I'm going to use the bitbox to trigger the samples and essentially record it into the ARBHAR. Okay, so there I had some samples already loaded, and so you can clear the buffer. There's 6 buffers, basically 6 10-second like multi-track, if you can think of it that way. And you press shift and the middle button and you can clear it. You can see by the really cool UI they have there where it glows red, meaning that you're striking that sample off that layer. It's like a granular sandwich. So that's how I visualized it, you know, like 6 grains that you record 10 seconds of, and you can kind of like shift through using different controls. So yeah, I'm just kind of going through the samples and kind of figuring out which one I want to load and record. So there's 2 things that I learned through this process is that it's not a stereo sampler. It's a mono sampler, and it has left and right, but it's more like out 1 and out 2, and it'll pan it in the stereo field if you have those outputs hard pan left and right. But it's a mono sampler, which kind of threw me off a little bit. Again, I should have probably read the manual a little bit closer. So these samples are all stereo, so they, you know, that was kind of a bummer, but you know, I just misread it. The second thing is, you know, ARBHAR is a real analog recorder. So you know, it's not like I loaded it up with files, which is, you know, it's just digital copies. So I had a hard time getting a real clean signal into the ARBHAR. So this, if you can hear, it's a little hissy too, because, you know, I'm trying to get it sort of hot so that the signal is nice. I know that you can overdrive it too. I heard about some like analog circuitry where you can like, you know, you can record on top of it, kind of like a tape machine. But you know, that was a little bit odd to me. So you know, I apologize if like this recording is a little hissy because I wasn't quite used to that. Yeah, I'm just like goofing too much with the bitbox. Again, I'll cover that at a later time. It's just too bad that it's just a mono signal. In stereo, it sounds fantastic. Yeah, so I found that little snippet, and then so now I got the five pads, or maybe the 6 pads. Oh, another weird thing about bitbox, and I don't want to like sidetrack too much, but I got to learn how to like terminate the sample. Yeah, so I'm trying to get the signal and trying to record. Okay, so there's record some of these samples into it. So yeah, so you just have to press record and be on the buffer, and then I'm gonna trigger. Yeah, there's a little bit of a lag there, so you can tell there's like a little meter that goes, like giving you where you are in the record heads, which is, you know, think of that entire path as like 10 seconds. Oh, whoops, yeah, I triggered too many samples. That shouldn't have mattered because I stopped it. Now you don't hear anything because I'm only putting the dry signal. But if you put the wet signal, which is the recorded input, see there, the piano is on there now. It's on the record head, or the buffer, the first buffer. So I'm gonna, yeah, so I'm recording it now. The guitar. Yeah, that I made a mistake there, so I'm gonna delete that. I think is what I'm doing. Yeah, I'm gonna just delete that and retry again. Yeah, so just press Shift and the middle button, and it deletes it. So I just want the guitar. Yeah, so you can see the record head move, and then you press stop, and I guess it kind of auto fades in out. I don't know. There's a lot of auto things that it does, which is really cool. So it's not a pristine recorder, which is. That's how it should be. It kind of does a lot of things automatically for you, so that you know, I was worried about like chopping and clips, but I mean, I just stop sounds at any given time, and it seems to be very musical. Yeah, this is the third buffer. I'm trying to decide what samples to put in. Oh yeah, I put the flute on the third, but the order might have gotten all screwed up. So yeah, again, this is, you know, just me kind of goofing around with it first, but recording samples in and playing it back is super fast and very easy, and it's pretty forgiving. So that way, again, it seems like it does some kind of magic to the sample where, like, if you press it, like there was a reverb tail, I think I cut it off, but yeah, so now if you put the wet signal, you can hear the flute. Again, it sounds so great because it's triggering multiple versions of that sample, like all granular synthesizers do. So it immediately sounds really cool. Yeah, that was the bass, and yeah, so that's the DECKARD'S bass patch that I made. That's on there, and again, just immediately sounds really interesting and huge because it takes that mono sample and yeah, it takes the mono sample and kind of pans it. So that's sort of a little bit on getting samples loaded onto the ARBHAR. Okay, so the first layer is the trusty piano, Hans Zimmer piano. Second is my wood flute that I sampled in. That is that's the guitar. The fourth patch is the DECKARD'S voice, just bass synth. Because the bass synth sample was like not long enough, the playhead was in the wrong place, so I had to move it back, and now you're hearing it. That's another DECKARD'S bass sample. Yeah, so basically, I think it was 5. I'm using 5 layers of the buffer, but you can have up to 6. So yeah, I mean, already just it sounds pretty cool. Really good at drone sounds. I'm kind of messing around with the length, so it was kind of ping-ponging a little bit. You can hear it, right? You can hear the ping-ponging effect as the more you make the length smaller. I haven't really changed the intensity, and there's like, you know, I'm not gonna go super into like every feature because I kind of don't know them myself. I know just enough to kind of, hey, what kind of sounds can I make out of it? Yeah, just again, I wanted to sort of sample in a bunch of wide range of different sounds to see, you know, which one I liked. So, you know, synthesizer source, guitar source, you know, a sample source, you know, like a woodwind, a live guitar, you know. They all sound great. Okay, so I'll just pause there for a second. So, you know, pretty basic stuff there. If you're not too familiar with granular synthesis, I mean, this is kind of like what you hear, like sort of ethereal kind of things. Again, based on what kind of sample you put into, you get these results. And these are pretty typical, you know, guitar, piano does well. The flute definitely was a kind of a cool surprise, especially with the Valhalla shimmer baked in. It just sounds like huge and really, really cool. So again, you know, me thinking about the GR1 a little bit, you know, again, it's a false comparison because GR1 is like a standalone huge synth. But what obviously makes ARBHAR interesting is that it's a EURORACK format and you can kind of like do a bunch of things with it. So I'm going to right here just try to modulate it a little bit, pretty basic. And I think it got some pretty cool results. Oh, but before I get to that, just a small small gripe that I had as I discovered, and maybe there's a workaround to this, but I haven't, you know, discovered it. The buffers, when you change from the first buffer to second buffer, third buffer, if you have like a different sort of a type of sound, let's say on the second buffer versus the first buffer, the intensity, the length, and the spray settings, they're not buffer independent, which is kind of a bummer, because let's say on the first one I have this piano and I want a really short length and like a really wide spray, and then on the second level I have like a bass sound, so I want a really long length and a really narrow spray. It doesn't remember it. If I'm doing it wrong, let me know, but I thought that was a big missed opportunity, because if it could remember that, then each of the buffers would be really amazing, because then they would have independent control over that. Even I would say the position, like again, if I'm doing it wrong, I don't know, but for first patch, like if your position is like in the middle and you switch the buffer, it stays on the same buffer. Like I would have thought that each buffer had its independent position too. So maybe I'm doing it wrong, but I couldn't figure it out. If that's the case, that's a bummer, because I think you should be able to do that. So here now, as I go on, I'm going to try to modulate it with maths. So here I'm just modulating the buffers, right? So it's just going from the first buffer, piano, to the guitar. It's going all the way around. So, which is the cool part, something that you know, EURORACKs really excel in, is this CV control, unlike say a standalone synthesizer like the GR1, which I'm sure there's ways to do it, but it's not nearly as intuitive as the EURORACK. You just plug in a LFO or you put in maths and you can immediately get some interesting results. I was just trying to get some more velocity, just some more movement. Okay, it's getting a little predictable, so I think I was just changing the curve and the fall time a little bit to see how much movement I can get. Again, very, very simple patch, which is just modulating the buffer, right? So now, here though, is where it was kind of cool. So this is modulating the pitch variance or pitch deviance. I can't remember what it's called. But immediately interesting. The one, and this is where I feel like the ARBHAR is uniquely different as far, you know, in the shallow kind of like, let me pause it for a sec. In the shallow kind of discovery I had so far, although I got pretty deep with the GR1, but with the ARBHAR, when you start to like pitch deviate, their algorithm or their function is a lot more musical and interesting. Because on the GR1, when I try to do the pitch shift thing, it just sounded goofy. So I stuck with either octave, you know, like the same, or the octave down or octave up. But whenever you change pitch, it sounded Mickey Mousey. But here, when you modulate the pitch, I think that's what it's essentially what it is. I think there's, in fact, I remember now the manual talking about the different kinds of sort of algorithm or their like kind of program that they do. But when you modulate that, you get some really interesting, results. Just smorgasbord of yeah, so modulating the pitch and also the different buffer layers. I mean, it's a little random and goofy, but again, you can see the possibilities of what it could become. Especially, I think if you, I'm gonna pause here for a sec. Especially if you, as now I realize, you know, that the samples should potentially be more related to each other, especially if you're gonna modulate it like this. Again, you can do whatever you want, but in my head, when I heard this, okay, maybe it should have been like 6 different layers of the wood flute, you know, but different registers, but they all sort of relate together, and then you bring it all back together inside ARBHAR using weird melodic tools and CV control, and they would all sort of interconnect, because as you switch from the buffer, you know, it wouldn't be so jarring. My only reason why I wanted to do the different instruments is just to get variety, just to kind of like see what type of source material would kind of do best. The piano sort of like did the thing that it does. The flute was a surprise. Guitar is always a big hit, you know, like pluck guitar, clean guitar is always like, you know, like favorite in these like demos that I've seen. The synthesizers also too. But I think having them all relate and do these kinds of interesting things, there just opens up, opens up a ton of possibilities. And so I try to make it a little slower, or you know what I did was make it slower. I just made the length of the grains a lot longer, and that's my other sort of if when I go back and do this again, I would keep the lengths, like I would really maximize the length of the entire buffer. You know, I wouldn't waste the 10-second buffer to anything, and try to maximize it, because the more sample buffer you have, the more you can play with, right? The smaller it is, well, you know, it's just dead space. Yeah, so super fun. Again, so the takeaway from this really was I gotta discover to see if there's a way to have the position, spray, and the intensity and the length be independent of with each buffer. It'd be great to know that. If maybe maybe I'm just missing a firmware. The other takeaway is try to do an experiment where all the sounds are like related as opposed to being so different. I also think that I want to avoid like transients, at least for time being, like to avoid the transients so that way they can blend easier. Because sometimes when you hit that hard transient and it hits it again, if you want to do it that way, that's fine. But for me, I think if I got rid of the transients, I think it would be able to switch more interestingly and musically. Especially because you don't need a whole lot of transients because there's so much velocity anyway. Like having transient be triggered a bunch of times just feels jarring to me. And then, and fourthly, like take up all the buffer. Like I had these samples that were like 8 seconds long, some were like 3 seconds long. So I think I think you want to maximize the entire buffer so that way you have more to play with. As opposed to kind of running out of stuff. And in fact, as far as I can tell, like when it hits, if you were to say modulate the position and you had a sample that's only like really short, well, if it ever kind of CV controlled into that dead space, you wouldn't hear anything, and that's probably not a good thing, unless you can sort of like regulate the length of the position, like so that on that buffer the position will only CV control just the length of that. But I don't think it works that way. It's in effect, this instrument is pretty like simple. I can't imagine having that much control. Then it just becomes like an Ableton plugin. But it sounds great. I mean, sort of, it's definitely analog. It's definitely like you got to know how to get good, clean signal in there. Again, I got some work to do. It was different from, say, the GR1 where you just stick a USB stick. So, that's an unfair comparison because this was really an analog transfer. So, of course, it's going to be noisy. But that also gives a character. But I don't want to have it I don't want to be like bad character where it's just poorly recorded because it's like I didn't record it hot enough. So I gotta kind of work on that.